Welcome back, everyone. Mike McConville here again, Stratford, Ontario, Canada. I wanted to bring you into the loop on the top replacement or soundboard replacement for this early 60s Gibson. So this is the soundboard we're putting on. This is the one that Jay fell on and basically crushed. All is not lost. Look at the thickness of that bridge plate. It's plywood. This is the bridge plate for the replacement top. And this is a pattern from a 1946 Gibson J45 golden era. That is the dimensions that they used back in the golden era. The other thing I noticed about the 40s bridge plates is they don't actually touch the X-brace. They float. There's space between the end of the bridge plate and the X-brace. Of course, on this top, about 40% of the mass that you see here after this is glued on, these are just loosely sitting on there. It's my dry run. This X-brace will be pared down considerably, so it will be light and strong, and it's got a 30-foot spherical radius. And the reason you put a radius is because it allows you to reduce the mass, because it's the radius that gives you your strength. So this is the original soundboard. What you want is quarter sawn grain. This one is actually quarter sawn. That is not quarter sawn, and even the X-brace is kind of rift sawn. I see that they've got this covered up. I wouldn't be surprised if that's just a butt joint. I'm not even going to bother looking. We're so far beyond this top. We'll have a much lighter, more resilient top that will actually be much stronger than this original top. Much lighter, much more responsive. So that's my radius sander that I designed 30 years ago. That's got a 30-foot spherical radius. The top here is on a 30-foot spherical radius table. And if I push on that, actually you can see it. It actually conforms perfectly. And this is our back and side assembly. So you got to remember in the 60s, early 60s, I mean, it was post-war. Everything was going full guns, cars and furniture and guitars. And if you look at these braces, they're all exactly the same width. They basically set up the table saw, ripped off a bunch of braces, and glued them into place. If you look at this top, the dimensions of the braces actually change quite a bit. At the apex of the X-brace, it's actually a little bit thicker. I thin out these braces. You look at the thickness on this end compared to the thickness at the lap joint. They taper, so they get a little bit thinner towards the tip. And a lot of what you see there is going to be gone. And this is our final dry run for the clamping configuration. Yeah, so that's my setup. It allows me to sort of glue all the braces on in one gluing session. Okay, so here is the finished top. Let me do a sort of comparison and explain why I did what I did. Number one, as you heard me mention, what we've done is we've reduced the mass directly underneath the bridge by putting a very thin 90 thou slip of quarter sawn rosewood. We've increased the mass where I feel it should be increased, which is at the apex of the X. This soundboard actually has a radius, so it'll have much more tensile strength with that 30-foot radius. These braces are similar. The placement is pretty close. I've pared these down. I think as far as overall mass, should be pretty well equal. We've further reduced the mass of the thicker X-brace by scalloping, and that's fairly common nowadays. A lot of people do that. I think in the final analysis, we've reduced the amount of weight or mass of the soundboard considerably. So the head brace it's close. I think mine might be a little bit thicker. The graph here, which is plywood, this is plywood on this one. It's 0.147. Well, I've got quarter sawn spruce. Actually, it's a cutoff from this soundboard going across there. So this is actually very light. Now, just to flip it over for a second, I put those plastic rings in there. It's pretty close, and I'm not going with that type of bridge. It'll be like a Martin style bridge. No bolts or fasteners either. We're pretty well ready to glue this to the side assembly. Little bit of fine sanding. So we've got this sanded thickness, braces pared down, the scalloping is done. We've really reduced the weight of this drastic. It's quite a bit higher here at the center of the apex where that lap joint is. But this has been thinned down like a knife edge, right? Little bit thicker here, and the reason for that is I've tapered it down this way. So we've got lots of strength around the sound hole. Initially, this head brace was radius to the 30-foot radius, but I did flatten it out from here to here. The reason I did that is because the fingerboard needs a flat surface to attach to. So it's just from here to here on this head brace that it was flattened out. Now this you don't have to worry about. It wasn't radius, this is just a graph. So that's straight. These were not radius. So what that does is it encourages that whole area where the fingerboard extension is glued to the body to be flat, to receive the underside of the fingerboard extension accurately. More on this later when we go to prepare the side assembly to glue this top plate on. We have a 90 thou quarter sawn rosewood bridge plate, much smaller than the original big hunkin' plywood one. It does not touch the X-brace. There's space between the X-brace and the bridge plate. After working on a lot of the golden era Gibsons, 20s, 30s, 40s, this is often the case. They leave a space between the X-brace and the bridge plate so that it floats. The scalloping is done, and this has been pared down considerably. And the overall response of the soundboard is very good. Top tone is great. The final quenching of the soundboard is going to be done around the perimeter of the lower bout after it's glued onto that back and side assembly. This is a 30-foot radius disc that this body assembly is sitting on. It's this loose brace here that I want to glue up. So I'm just holding it into place with these clamps. I'm heating up the high glue. I do have a little slip of plastic that is going underneath that brace. So I can load the hide glue onto that plastic and then push it back and forth, work it in, and make sure that we don't starve that joint. I'm going to put my clamp on and make sure we've got lots of squeeze, glue squeeze. Yeah, I can see that squeezing right through on the other side, and that's what you want. So we did not starve that joint. That brace will never let go now. Well, this is our final dry run for fitting that top to the back and side assembly. We've got the rims and head block and tail block radiused, everything notched out to receive the new top. And I'll give you one final look at this top before we glue it on. When I removed that top, I did get it off very, very clean, but there's one section right here that I'm redoing the kerfing. Leaving this kerfing a little bit proud. I'm going to sand it down with the radius sander, even with the original kerfing, and then we'll have 100% contact. I will try and explain this as best I can. I'm going to bring you in to this head block. This is the last little bit of preparation before we glue that top on. So you have to remember that the whole rim assembly, head block, tail block, and kerfing has been sanded to a 30-foot spherical radius. So in order to ensure that the fingerboard extension sits flat, we needed to block sand across that head block very gently, and I've done that to flatten that out. So now when I put that straight edge on there, the slight radius on the top of that head block has been taken out and flattened. Now, I did refer to this earlier on in the video, the head brace, which goes right here. The center portion of the head brace was flattened out. The outside tips actually follow that 30-foot radius. And the graph that goes across a little bit tighter to the head block, it's not radiused. So the idea is when we glue the fingerboard on that we don't have a radius to contend with, because the underside of the fingerboard is not radiused, it's dead flat. So it'll make more sense as as we start to attach the neck to the body and get on the final run with that. So I've verified that, and we've basically eliminated that radius on the head block. So I use this 80 grit sandpaper to just kind of level that out, and it'll make more sense. You'll have a look. When we go to put that neck back on and we glue the fingerboard extension, we'll have a nice flat surface. Alright, we're getting ready to glue this top back on. I'm just bringing in, I did show this in a previous video, I have that piece of electrical tape that goes around the kerfing all the way around. When I pull in, you'll see that drip of glue coming down the side. Now that happened when the original top was glued on, but that's what we're trying to avoid. So we've got that electrical tape. The trick is you need to put that electrical tape in one piece. When we're ready, reach in through the sound hole, give that a yank and pull it out. And of course, the hide glue does not stick to electrical tape. We'll just sort of start here at the tail block. I don't smear the whole tail block. I have mentioned this in other videos as well. Just the outside edge along the kerfing line, and that's it. Now the head block I do go all the way across. You have a little bit of open time with the hide glue, but you still got to move fairly quickly. So I've already done the dry run multiple times. We've got a perfect fit on this top, the radius, and yeah, she'll and that last little bit here. So we are good to go. Now I have these pieces of tape, 8 pieces, so that we get this started. So I go at the outside of the upper bout, lower bout. Just get that down first. And then waist. I've just doubled up this masking tape so it doesn't tear. Get the waist, head block, and tail block. Now this is what we actually use to really attach that. What's nice about these rubber bands is you can actually kind of adjust them after the fact. So I'm just sort of going around and just seeing if there's any movement here. No, it all looks good. And that, my friends, is it. That top is on there. Well, as I suspected, like I said earlier, I wasn't even going to pull that cloth off that X brace, but sure enough, it's not even a lap joint. It's 3 pieces of wood. This piece goes right through. This is not a blind joint. It's just just butts up to the either side of this piece. So we actually have 3 pieces of wood. Boy, oh boy. Anyway, Jay will never regret changing this top over. So once again, I just thought I would bring you into the loop on that one. We got 1, 2, and 3 pieces of wood. It's not a blind lap joint. So much for structural integrity.